So whether you are a law student staring down just an absolute mountain of bar exam prep, or maybe a professional who is literally drowning in daily tasks and endless emails, you probably feel overwhelmed right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, cognitive overload is pretty much the default state of modern life at this point.
It really is. And, I want to welcome you, the listener, to this deep dive because today we are tackling something that I think affects every single one of us. We're looking at an incredible stack of sources spanning quantum biology, neuroscience, and, well, advanced memory techniques.
Yeah, the mission today is to really pull back the curtain on the fascinating and honestly sometimes bizarre relationship between consciousness and memory.
Right, because by the end of this deep dive, the goal is that you will understand how to fundamentally rewire your brain. Like to protect against that information overload, to manage those heavy study loads if you're a student, and to use these ancient techniques to recall information effortlessly.
Which sounds like a huge promise, I know. But the science backing this up is just phenomenal.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to start with a story from the sources. In the fall of 1953, there was this 27-year-old man named Henry, and he walked into a hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. He was hoping for a miracle, essentially.
Right, because his life was virtually unlivable at that point.
Exactly. He suffered from debilitating epilepsy. I
Yeah.
mean, seizures so severe that he couldn't hold a job, couldn't live a normal life. So desperate, his neurosurgeon decides on this really radical experimental approach.
Very experimental for the time, yeah.
He drilled into Henry's skull and actually suctioned out the medial temporal lobe on both sides of his brain. And that included this little seahorse-shaped structure, right? The hippocampus?
Yeah, the hippocampus. And, it was a decision that would inadvertently revolutionize our entire understanding of the human mind.
Because the surgery actually worked, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the seizures virtually stopped.
They did. But the cost of that success was just unfathomable.
When Henry, who, by the way, would be known in all the medical literature for decades simply as patient HM, when he woke up, his consciousness had become completely permanently trapped in the present tense.
It's so hard to even conceptualize what that feels like.
No, like if you walked into his hospital room, introduced yourself, and then just stepped out into the hallway for, say, 60 seconds.
Just a minute, yeah.
When you walked back in, he would look at you like you were a complete stranger. He couldn't form a single new conscious memory for the rest of his entire life.
And anyone who has, taken a basic psychology course likely knows that part of the story. Patient HM is famous. It's the devastating loss of his declarative memory.
The explicit stuff.
Right, the explicit memory. The complete inability to remember what he had for breakfast or who the president was. But what makes his case the perfect starting point for us today isn't what he lost. It is what he somehow inexplicably retained.
Exactly, because this is the wild part. Despite his mind being wiped clean every few minutes, researchers decided to give him a highly specific, kind of awkward physical task.
Yeah, the star tracing task.
Right. They asked him to draw a line between two concentric stars. But the catch is, he couldn't look directly at his hand. He could only see his hand and the star through a mirror.
Which, if you've ever tried doing anything in a mirror, everything is reversed. It's incredibly frustrating.
Oh, it messes with your brain so much. And on the first day, he failed miserably, crossing the lines constantly, making tons of errors. But over the next 3 days, they had him keep practicing.
And here is the paradox. On day 3, if you sat down and asked HM if he had ever seen that star tracing task before in his life, he would politely tell you no.
He had absolute zero conscious recollection of the mirror, the pencil, the researchers, none of it.
But when they handed him the pencil, his hands knew exactly what to do.
Wow.
He traced the star flawlessly. His brain had learned and retained a highly complex procedural skill completely outside of his conscious awareness.
Which just shatters the conventional illusion of what memory actually is, doesn't it?
Totally. I mean, we so often use these lazy modern metaphors. We say our brain is like a computer hard drive.
Right, or a filing cabinet.
Or that is running out of storage space. But HM's hands tracing that star, it proves that memory isn't a static file you save to a desktop. It is a dynamic, living, highly compartmentalized physical rewiring of the organism itself.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today.
Oh.
We are going to tear apart that hard drive illusion. Before we can use any of the advanced memory hacks from the sources, we really have to understand what the hardware actually is.
And that means starting at the absolute microscopic subatomic level of how a thought physically forms.
Right, and I'll admit, when I started looking at our research on the physical mechanics of the mind, I kind of hit a wall. Because, I have always been taught that the fundamental unit of computation in the brain is the neuron.
The synapse, yeah.
Yeah, the connection between two cells. That's what neuroscience always says. But the data we are looking at suggests we have to go much, much smaller than that, down to a theory called ORC or R.
Orchestrated objective reduction. Yes, and it is a theory that challenges the very foundation of classical neuroscience.
It's a huge shift.
It is. To understand it, we have to look at the work of Sir Roger Penrose, who is a Nobel laureate physicist, and Stuart Hameroff, a prominent anesthesiologist. For decades, the prevailing dogma has been that consciousness and memory emerge simply from the complex firing of our 86 billion neurons.
Communicating across roughly 100 trillion synapses.
Precisely. The emergence theory. If you connect enough wires together, eventually the machine wakes up.
Right. It just starts experiencing the world because of the sheer complexity of the wiring.
But Penrose and Hameroff looked at that and fundamentally disagreed. They proposed that the neuron is far too large to be the foundational unit of consciousness.
Too large. A neuron is microscopic.
I know, but instead they pointed to the internal scaffolding of the cells themselves. These tiny cylindrical structures called microtubules.
Okay, microtubules. I remember these vaguely from, high school biology. They are literally the structural skeleton of the cell.
Yeah, exactly. They give the cell its shape.
And they act like little conveyor belts moving molecules around inside the neuron. But they always seemed purely mechanical to me, like the wooden 2x4 studs inside the walls of a house.
And for a long time, that is exactly how the scientific community viewed them, just structural support. They are composed of a protein called tubulin, but what Hameroff and Penrose theorized in the Orcher-R model is that these tubulin proteins are actually capable of quantum computation.
Quantum computation inside the brain.
Yes. Because of their specific lattice structure, they suggest that these proteins can exist in a state of quantum superposition.
Okay, let's slow down and define that for a second, because we are seriously blending biology and quantum physics here. Superposition is the concept that, at a subatomic level, particles can exist in multiple states or locations simultaneously, right?
Yes, exactly.
Until they are observed or they interact with their environment, at which point they collapse into a single definite state. Like Schrodinger's cat, basically.
It is the core weirdness of quantum mechanics, yeah. What the Orcher theory posits is that millions of these tubulin proteins inside your brain's microtubules are constantly entering quantum superposition.
So they are calculating vast amounts of information simultaneously.
Right. And when that superposition reaches a specific biological threshold, boom, it collapses. That moment of quantum collapse, that objective reduction, is what Penrose and Hameroff argue is a singular moment of conscious awareness.
A thought.
A thought, a feeling, the very spark of a memory being born.
So our consciousness might actually be a continuous, rapid-fire series of quantum wave collapses happening inside the structural scaffolding of our brain cells.
That's the theory.
I mean, honestly, it sounds like science fiction. It is a massive claim to make. What evidence do we actually have to support something so insanely microscopic?
Well, the most compelling evidence comes directly from Hameroff's field, which is anesthesiology.
Oh, interesting.
Think about what general anesthesia actually does. It is the only medical intervention we have that reliably, reversibly extinguishes human consciousness.
And it completely halts the formation of explicit memory.
Exactly. But for a long time, how it worked, the actual physical mechanism was a mystery.
Wait, really? We've been putting people under for surgery for, over a century? And we didn't actually know the mechanism.
I mean, we knew it worked safely, but the exact microscopic target was debated. The research we are looking at points out something extraordinary. Anesthetic gas molecules specifically bind to the tubulin proteins within these microtubules.
Oh, wow.
And when they do bind, they disrupt the quantum coherence. They prevent those quantum superpositions from happening.
So the moment that quantum environment is interrupted, consciousness just vanishes.
The lights go out. The recording mechanism of your memory entirely stops. It is a profound link, suggesting that our conscious experience is fundamentally tethered to this subneuronal quantum environment.
I want to make sure I have this conceptualized correctly for the listener. It's almost like looking at a smart house. The classical view of neuroscience says that the walls and the physical wiring, the 86 billion neurons and all those synapses, are the intelligence of the house.
Right.
But this quantum theory suggests the neurons are just the structural walls. The actual consciousness, the data of who we are, is the light traveling through microscopic fiber optic cables embedded inside those walls.
That's a great analogy.
And if you pump in a gas that clouds those fiber optics, disrupting the quantum light, The physical house is still there, the wiring is completely intact, the heart is still beating, but the house is completely dark. The consciousness is gone.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it, and it bridges perfectly to the next critical piece of the puzzle. Because while consciousness may originate at that fleeting quantum level, long-term memory requires permanence.
Right. It can't just be a flash of light.
Exactly. It requires physical structure. Those quantum flashes of awareness have to translate into actual biological changes in the meat of the brain if we are going to remember anything tomorrow.
So if the quantum collapse is the flash of the camera, how do we actually print the photograph?
Through a biological mechanism called synaptic plasticity. As you mentioned, we have 100 trillion synapses. These are the microscopic gaps between neurons where chemical messengers, neurotransmitters, cross over to pass along a signal.
Like dopamine and serotonin and all those.
Right. Synaptic plasticity is the brain's ability to constantly strengthen, weaken, or build entirely new synapses based on our experiences.
Meaning the brain is plastic. It is highly moldable.
It is. Every time you consciously focus on something, every time that quantum system registers a new, meaningful experience, the neurons involved fire together. And as the old neuroscience axiom goes, neurons that fire together, wire together.
So the physical structure of your brain actually changes.
Yes. It builds thicker connections, allowing signals to travel faster and more efficiently the next time. This is how a transient thought becomes a permanent structural memory.
Okay, I have to jump in here and push back a little bit on behalf of everyone listening. Because we just established that the human brain is perhaps the most complex biological machine in the known universe.
It definitely is.
We have quantum computations happening in billions of microtubules, driving a continuously morphing network of 100 trillion synapses to record the universe of our experience.
Right.
If that is true, why on earth do I still forget where I left my car keys?
Mm-hmm.
Or, why do I walk into a room and instantly forget why I went in there?
It is the ultimate paradox of the human condition, isn't it? A quantum supercomputer defeated by a keychain.
Literally. It's so frustrating.
But the answer to your question reveals the most common vulnerability in our memory system. Memory formation happens in 3 distinct sequential stages: registration, retention, and retrieval.
Okay, registration, retention, retrieval.
Right. When you forget your keys 99% of the time, it isn't a failure of your brain's storage capacity. It is a failure of the very first stage, registration.
Meaning, wait, I didn't actually forget where I put them because my brain never recorded it in the first place.
Precisely. Think about the act of putting your keys down after work. You walk through the front door, you toss the keys on the kitchen counter. But what is your conscious mind actually doing?
Oh, I'm listening to a podcast. I'm worrying about a work email I just got. I'm trying to remember what I need to make for dinner.
Your attention is fractured in 5 different directions.
Yeah, completely scattered.
Right. And because your conscious attention was elsewhere, the physical act of dropping the keys never triggered that focused quantum awareness we just talked about. The data never even entered your short-term working memory.
So it was never passed to the hippocampus to be encoded.
Exactly. The synapses never rewired. You cannot retrieve a file that you never saved to the hard drive.
Wow. So if memory fundamentally requires conscious encoding, then our modern lifestyle is practically a memory destruction machine.
It truly is.
We are culturally conditioned to be constantly distracted. We are praised for multitasking. We try to pay attention to a screen, a conversation, and an internal anxiety all at the exact same time. We're trying to encode absolutely everything, and as a biological result, we are encoding absolutely nothing.
That is the exact crux of cognitive overload. We are demanding that our brain register an infinite stream of data, which is physically impossible.
Right.
And it leads us to a vital and frankly counterintuitive concept in our research. If you want to remember more, if you want your memory to function with the precision of that quantum architecture, you first need to learn how to actively, intentionally forget.
Oh, I love this transition in the text because it takes us from the microscopic mechanics of the brain into a much broader psychological framework. And our sources use a brilliant mythological metaphor to explain this balance.
The Greek myths, yes.
Yeah, the myths of Mnemosyne and Lethe. I am just fascinated by how the ancients understood neurobiology through storytelling.
They possessed a profound allegorical understanding of human psychology long before we had fMRI machines. In Greek mythology, Mnemosyne is the Titan goddess of memory.
The mother of the 9 muses, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
she represents everything we strive for when we study or create. The preservation of truth, the archiving of knowledge, the inspiration for art. She is the light of conscious retention.
But the research makes it clear that Mnemosyne does not exist in a vacuum. She has a shadow counterpart.
Yes. Lethe, the river of oblivion located in the underworld.
The River of Oblivion.
According to the myth, souls who had died were required to drink from the waters of Lethe to completely erase their memories of their earthly life before they could be reincarnated.
So it is the ultimate symbol of forgetting.
Exactly. Now, on the surface, Mnemosyne and Lethe seem like enemies, memory versus forgetting. But the ancient wisdom, which modern neuroscience totally corroborates, is that they are entirely interdependent. Balancing them is the secret to mental clarity.
Okay, so let's translate this mythological concept into actionable reality for someone listening right now. Maybe they're sitting in traffic or dealing with a massive project deadline. How do we use the River of Oblivion to our advantage?
By recognizing that healthy forgetting is a biological necessity. In the information age, we are perpetually bombarded with what the research explicitly calls mental garbage.
Mental garbage, like what?
Toxic social media algorithms, relentless advertising, political propaganda from all sides, endless streams of irrelevant news, and even our own internal limiting beliefs. Every piece of that garbage that you allow your conscious mind to process consumes metabolic energy. It takes up synaptic space.
It's the registration problem all over again. If I'm using my brain's energy to encode some useless argument I saw on social media, I literally don't have the physiological resources left to encode the legal brief I'm supposed to be studying.
Exactly. If you do not actively practice sleep, if you do not intentionally drink from the waters of oblivion and discard this daily noise, your mnemosity is suffocated.
You have to aggressively filter what you allow into your registration phase.
You have to empty the cup before you can fill it with something valuable.
And the research doesn't just leave this as a philosophical metaphor, which I appreciate. It grounds this need for oblivion in hard neuroscience, specifically by looking at two opposing networks in the brain, the TPN and the TNN.
Yes, the TPN and TNN.
Can we break these down? Because understanding this toggle switch seems crucial for anyone trying to study or work efficiently.
Absolutely. The TPN is the task-positive network. The TNN is the task-negative network, which is often referred to in broader literature as the default mode network.
Right, the DMN.
Think of them as a neurological seesaw. They are anti-correlated. When one is highly active, the other is suppressed.
So what does it feel like to be in the TPN, like experientially?
The task-positive network is your mode of intense laser-like concentration. It fires up when you are deeply engaged in an external task that requires executive function.
Like writing a complex essay.
Or solving a calculus problem, or actively memorizing vocabulary for an exam. The TPN requires immense metabolic energy. It is pulling glucose and oxygen rapidly to the frontal lobes to maintain that focus and block out external distractions.
It's the hustle mode. It's the state of mind society tells us we should be in for like 8 to 10 hours a day if we want to be successful.
And that societal expectation is neurologically devastating. It is a recipe for burnout and memory failure because the brain simply cannot sustain continuous TPN activity.
It just runs out of fuel.
The metabolic cost is too high. Eventually, the system fatigues, your focus shatters, and you experience severe cognitive drain.
Which is where the TNN comes in to save us, the task-negative network.
Exactly. The TNN comes alive when you stop focusing on the external world and turn inward. It is active during involuntary actions, daydreaming, mind-wandering, or when you are doing something highly routine that requires no executive thought.
Like taking a shower or staring out the window on a train.
Yes. But again, I feel like modern work culture demonizes this. If a manager walks by and sees you staring blankly out a window, they assume you are lazy. They assume you are wasting time.
Oh, 100%. We feel guilty for resting.
But internally, your brain is doing the exact opposite of wasting time. The research emphasizes that the TNN is the engine of memory consolidation and creative synthesis.
Okay, explain that. How does daydreaming consolidate memory?
When you step back and let your mind wander, you are giving your hippocampus the downtime it requires to organize the data you just absorbed during your TPN phase. It is moving information from short-term holding into long-term structural networks.
So it's filing the paperwork.
Exactly. And the TNN is also where disparate ideas connect. That is why you can struggle with a complex problem at your desk for 3 hours, get nowhere, and then the solution suddenly pops into your head while you're washing the dishes.
Because the task-negative network was running in the background, sifting through the files, making the connections while your conscious focus was turned off.
Precisely. If you force a 100% CPN schedule, You are just jamming raw data into the system without ever giving the system time to file it. It's like piling endless boxes in a hallway until you can't walk anymore.
So let's make this highly practical. For the student staring at a mountain of textbooks or the professional trying to manage a brutal daily schedule, how do we actually structure our day to balance this seesaw and minimize cognitive drain?
You have to intentionally schedule your oblivion. The text suggests working in highly structured chunks. The optimal rhythm for sustained cognitive output without burnout is a cycle. 20 minutes of deep, uninterrupted focus.
Pure TPN activity.
Right, followed immediately by 10 minutes of physical or mindless activity to activate the TNN and reset the brain.
Wait, 20 minutes, that sounds incredibly short. Most people try to study or work for 2 or 3 hours straight.
I know, but by hour 2, their retention rate has plummeted to near zero, even if they feel like they are working hard. The brain's peak capacity for high-fidelity registration drops off significantly after 20 to 30 minutes. By stopping at 20 minutes, you are halting the process before the metabolic fatigue sets in.
But what are we supposed to do during those 10 minutes of rest? Because my immediate instinct, and I know I'm not alone in this, is to pick up my phone and scroll through social media or read the news.
Which is the worst possible thing you can do.
Really? Even just looking at Instagram.
Let's be very clear about this. Scrolling your phone is not task-negative rest. It is just a fractured, chaotic, highly stressful form of task-positive activity.
Oh, because I'm still processing information.
Exactly. You are still forcing your brain to process new information, interpret images, and react to emotional stimuli. You are still draining the battery.
Okay, so true TNN rest has to be devoid of new information input.
Yes. The 10 minutes should be truly task-negative. Wash the dishes, fold a load of laundry, go for a short walk without a podcast playing. Or literally just sit in a chair, close your eyes, and let your mind drift.
Just do nothing.
Basically. The text specifically recommends incorporating brief moments of absolute silence into your daily routine for mental rejuvenation. Just sitting in your car for 2 minutes with the radio off before walking into the house after work.
It's about creating a buffer zone between activities.
Exactly. Furthermore, you have to establish baseline habits to protect your mental space against digital overload. Turn off non-essential push notifications. Don't keep multiple browser tabs open if you aren't using them. Giving yourself permission to daydream and disconnect isn't laziness. It is a biological requirement for protecting your cognitive architecture.
Okay, so we've established that the brain needs this alternating rhythm of focus and downtime to process information.
Yeah.
We understand the software, so to speak. But even with perfect software, a computer can't run without a power source.
Right. The hardware needs fuel.
Exactly. What are the physiological prerequisites, the actual biological fuel our brains need before we even attempt to memorize a textbook or master a new skill?
This is a crucial pivot. Memory is fundamentally a physiological process. It relies entirely on the biological health of the organism. You can't expect superior cognitive output from a body that is compromised. We have to prime the brain.
And our research outlines 3 very specific physical exercises that actually boost overall brain power and memory retention. And I want to dig into the why behind these, because they range from the conventional to the quite unusual. The first one is pretty straightforward. The stationary bicycle.
It seems basic, but the biological impact is highly targeted. The text cites a specific protocol showing that just 15 to 20 minutes of pedaling a stationary bike dramatically increases blood flow and oxygenation to the brain.
Just getting the heart rate up.
But it goes deeper than just oxygen. This specific type of sustained, moderate cardiovascular exercise stimulates the secretion of neuroprotective proteins. The most important of these is BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDNF. I've heard neuroscientists refer to this as miracle grow for the brain. What is it actually doing in there?
That's an accurate nickname, really. BDNF is a protein that actively stimulates neurogenesis.
The growth of new neurons.
Yes, particularly in the hippocampus, which, as we know from patient HM, is the epicenter of memory formation. It also strengthens the myelin sheath around existing neurons and promotes the formation of new synapses.
So by doing 20 minutes on a stationary bike, you are literally flooding your brain with the chemical fertilizer it needs to structurally rewire itself before you sit down to study.
Exactly. It's the perfect pre-study routine.
That is fascinating. Now, exercise number 2 is much less conventional. It's called the pinky and thumb exercise. I actually tried this one while going through the research, and it is maddening.
Oh, it's so hard at first.
Let me explain it for the listener. You hold up both hands in front of you. On your left hand, you tuck in your fingers and stick only your thumb out.
Well,
On your right hand, You tuck in your fingers and stick only your pinky out. Then, simultaneously, you have to switch. Left hand pinky out, right hand thumb out.
And how did that go for you when you tried it?
I looked ridiculous. My fingers completely refused to cooperate. My brain felt like a car engine sputtering and stalling. I had to look at my hands and painfully concentrate just to get one switch right.
And that intense, stuttering feeling, that friction, is the entire point. It is a brain-training coordination game. Because it is a novel, complex, cross-lateral motor task, it forces your frontal lobe to divide its attention and map entirely new neural pathways on the fly.
It forces the two hemispheres of your brain to communicate rapidly.
Yes, across the corpus callosum. When you stumble, feel that mental friction, and try again, you are actively building mental agility. It's like lifting weights for your motor cortex.
That makes so much sense. And exercise number 3 is in a similar vein, referred to in the text as the earlobe hold, or a form of mental yoga.
Right, this involves crossing your arms in front of your chest and pinching your opposite earlobes between your thumb and index finger while performing a series of light, focused squats.
Like the pinky thumb drill, it is designed to stimulate immense focus.
You are forcing the brain to balance physical exertion, cross-lateral body coordination, and spatial equilibrium all at once. Doing these daily primes, the neural circuitry, waking the brain up from its habitual slumber.
Which ties perfectly into this broader concept in the sources called neurobics. I had never heard this term before, but I love the philosophy behind it.
Neurobics are essentially aerobic exercises for the neurons. The core principle is to engage multiple senses simultaneously in novel ways to create what the text calls a neural safety net.
What does a neural safety net actually look like in practice?
Think about how fragile a memory can be if it only relies on one sensory input. Let's say you are trying to remember the name of a new colleague. Usually you just rely on a visual and an audio cue. You see their face and you hear their name.
Right.
But if you are tired or distracted, that single neural pathway might fail and you forget the name.
The classic, I know your face, but the name is completely gone moment. We've all been there.
Exactly. But what if, when you met them, you intentionally engaged your sense of smell, touch, and spatial awareness? You notice the distinct smell of their coffee, you pay attention to the rough texture of their handshake, and you note exactly where you are standing in the room.
Oh, I see.
By intentionally firing multiple sensory cortices simultaneously, you are building multiple associative links, multiple neural pathways, to that single memory of their name. If the visual cue fails to retrieve the data, the olfactory or tactile cue might catch it. That web of connections is the safety net.
So how do we incorporate neurobics into a daily routine? The sources suggest starting first thing in the morning to wake the brain up effectively.
The goal is to break the brain out of autopilot. Most of us have a morning routine that we perform like zombies. We walk to the bathroom, brush our teeth, get dressed, and pour coffee without a single conscious thought.
Our brain is using almost zero metabolic energy because the pathways are so deeply rutted.
We are entirely an unconscious competence for our morning routine. To do a morning neurobic, you disrupt the routine. Try getting dressed with your eyes closed, relying entirely on tactile feedback. Or, the classic example, brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand.
I've tried that one too. It feels incredibly awkward. You realize how much fine motor control you take for granted.
And that awkwardness demands active conscious processing. The brain has to suddenly pay attention to the angle of the brush, the pressure on the gums. By forcing the brain out of its habitual rut first thing in the morning, you demand active blood flow and oxygen to the frontal lobes. You are priming the pump for the intellectual tasks you have to tackle later.
It's brilliant. Now, before we move on to how we actually input data into this primed brain, the sources make a hard stop to remind us about basic lifestyle habits. Because no amount of neurobics or stationary biking will save you if you are destroying your brain chemically.
Very true.
Let's run through the baselines required to preserve mental energy.
The baselines are non-negotiable. First, sleep, 7 to 9 hours. As we discussed with the TNN, sleep is the primary mechanism for memory consolidation. If you cut your sleep short, you are literally cutting off the biological process of transferring short-term experiences into permanent long-term cortical networks.
A sleep-deprived brain is a brain that cannot store new information.
Period.
Second is diet and hydration. The text specifically highlights the need for a nutrition-packed diet rich in organic glucose.
Yeah.
Can we clarify that?
Yeah.
Because glucose is just sugar, right? Does that mean I should eat a candy bar before an exam?
Absolutely not. While it is true that the brain runs exclusively on glucose, it is an incredibly energy-hungry organ. The source of that glucose is critical. When the text says organic glucose, it is referring to complex carbohydrates and natural sugars found in whole foods.
Like fruits, vegetables, whole grains.
Exactly. These foods are broken down slowly, providing a steady, sustained stream of glucose to the brain over hours.
Giving you sustained focus.
Right. If you eat refined sugar, a candy bar, or an energy drink, you get a massive spike in blood glucose. The brain gets a brief rush of energy, but it is immediately followed by an insulin spike and a subsequent blood sugar crash.
And that crash manifests as brain fog, lethargy, and a complete inability to maintain TPN focus.
Exactly. And the final lifestyle baseline is managing neurotoxins, specifically limiting alcohol and managing caffeine. I was actually stunned by the statistic in the text regarding alcohol.
It is a sobering metric, pardon the pun. The text notes that people who consume alcohol regularly make around 30% more memory mistakes in their daily lives.
30%. That is a massive degradation of capability.
Why is alcohol so destructive to memory? I mean, a lot of people who go a glass of wine to unwind.
Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, but its most insidious effect on memory happens while you sleep. Even moderate amounts of alcohol severely disrupt REM sleep.
Which is this specific sleep phase where the brain processes and solidifies complex emotional and declarative memories.
Yes. It also directly interferes with the hippocampus's ability to encode new information while you are awake. You are essentially pouring sand into the gears of the very machine you were trying to optimize.
Okay, so let's take stock of where we are. We have explored the quantum and biological reality of how memories physically form. We understand the necessity of balancing our intense focus, the TPN, with the quiet consolidation of daydreaming, the TNN.
Right.
We have primed the hardware by flooding it with BDNF through exercise, waking up the neural pathways with neurobics, and protecting it with sleep and proper glucose.
Right.
We've built the perfect biological machine.
The hardware is fully optimized.
Yeah.
How do we properly input the data? How do we observe the world in a way that guarantees the information sticks? Because a primed brain is useless if you are feeding it low-quality data.
This is where we upgrade the software of human perception. To make information stick long-term, you must fundamentally change how you observe your environment. We have to differentiate between what the research calls a passive gaze and an active gaze. I feel like a passive gaze is what I do 90% of the day. It's staring at a television screen for 3 hours and realizing I can't remember a single line of dialogue, or driving my usual ride home and having zero memory of the actual drive.
Because your eyes are open, but your consciousness is disengaged. You are seeing, but you are not observing. Mindful, active observation requires immense intention. It is the conscious decision to anchor your awareness in the present moment and store the specific details of your daily experience.
And the text provides a brilliant, simple exercise to practice this called the vase or tree exercise. I love how accessible this is. You can do it anywhere.
It is the perfect training ground for mindful observation. Walk us through it.
So you simply pick an object in your environment. Let's say it's a tree outside your office window. Instead of just glancing at it and letting your brain lazily categorize it as tree, you force yourself to actively gaze at it.
You meticulously note the specific details.
Right, the texture of the bark. You look at how the branches fork at certain angles. You notice a chipped piece of paint on the fence behind it. You study the exact varying shades of green on the leaves where the sun hits them versus where they are in shadow. You absorb it with hyperfocus.
And then comes the critical memory test. You look away or close your eyes and try to reconstruct that image in your mind's eye with as much high-fidelity detail as possible. Then you open your eyes and check your accuracy.
What did you miss? Did you forget the curve of that lower branch?
Exactly. And the source adds a crucial final step, writing those observations down.
Why does putting pen to paper matter so much for brain power?
Because writing forces a neurological translation. You are taking raw visual and spatial data from your occipital lobe, processing it through your conscious working memory, and forcing your motor cortex and language centers to translate that imagery into linguistic symbols words on a page.
Oh, that makes sense.
This cross-regional processing creates a much deeper, more robust memory trace. It is actively building your natural capacity for observation.
Okay, so that works beautifully for training everyday mindfulness. But here is where it gets incredibly practical for our listeners. Let's say I'm not looking at a tree. Let's say I am a medical student trying to learn the complex anatomy of the human heart, or a professional trying to memorize the key points of a massive presentation. How do we take that active observation and supercharge it to learn complex new academic skills quickly?
For that, the sources outline an incredibly powerful foundational mnemonic tool called the C principle. SEE.
The C principle.
Yes, it is a framework for transforming dry, boring data into unforgettable mental imagery. Let's break down the acronym.
Let's start with S senses. We touched on this with neurobics, but how does it apply to studying?
It means that when you are trying to encode a new piece of information, you must intentionally imagine how it interacts with all five senses. The human brain did not evolve to remember abstract text on a page. It evolved to remember the physical world.
So if you're studying the anatomy of the heart, don't just look at the diagram.
Imagine the heavy, rhythmic thudding sound it makes. Imagine the metallic smell of the blood. Imagine the slick, muscular texture of the tissue in your hands. By engaging the sensory cortices, you are tricking the brain into treating academic data like a real physical experience.
That is visceral. And it leads perfectly into the first easy exaggeration.
Exaggeration leverages an evolutionary bias. The brain is hardwired to remember the unusual, the bizarre, the comical, and the dangerous, because those are the things that dictate survival.
It is highly efficient at forgetting the mundane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want to remember something, you must make the mental image absolutely absurd or completely out of proportion.
Give me a practical example of that. Let's say I'm going to the store and I absolutely cannot forget to buy a beach ball for a party.
If you just picture a normal plastic beach ball sitting in your shopping cart, your brain will discard that image in 5 seconds. It's too boring. Instead, use exaggeration. Imagine a beach ball the size of a three-story house.
A giant beach ball.
Imagine it completely blocking your driveway, glowing with blinding neon radioactive colors. You want the image to be so ridiculous that your brain can't help but pay attention to it.
And then we apply the final E, energize.
Because a static image, even a giant one, is still less memorable than a moving one. The brain tracks motion better than anything else. Energize means giving your exaggerated image violent or dynamic action.
So I don't just picture that giant neon beach ball sitting in the driveway.
No, you imagine it bouncing aggressively. It is smashing into cars, setting off car alarms. It is making a deafening, cartoonish, BOIing sound with every bounce. The air pressure from it bouncing is knocking you over.
Senses, exaggeration, energize. I can literally see that happening in my head right now. You take a boring piece of data and you produce a blockbuster, multi-sensory movie scene in your mind.
Exactly. And the reason this movie scene approach works so flawlessly is because it serves as the foundation for the next major concept in our research, the emotional-based method.
This is fascinating to me. We usually think of studying as a purely cold, logical, intellectual pursuit. But the sources suggest that emotion is actually the most powerful engine of memory retention. Why is that?
It comes down to neuroanatomy. We talked about the hippocampus being the recording mechanism for explicit memory. Well, situated right next to the hippocampus in the medial temporal lobe is an almond-shaped structure called the amygdala.
The amygdala is the processing center for human emotion, fear, joy, surprise, anger.
They are literal biological next-door neighbors, and they are intimately connected. When you experience an event that triggers a strong emotional response, the amygdala fires intensely. It sends a direct, urgent signal to the hippocampus, essentially saying, pay attention, this event caused fear, or this event caused immense joy. This is critical for our survival. Store this data permanently and immediately.
This explains why I can't remember what I had for lunch last Tuesday, but I can remember every terrifying, granular detail of a car accident I was in 10 years ago. The emotional spike seared the data into the hard drive.
Precisely. Evolution ensures we don't forget the things that hurt us or the things that bring us immense reward. The emotional-based method is about intentionally hijacking that biological wiring to memorize academic or professional data.
And the text details a specific exercise for this, called the Alessandra story technique. How does that work?
The technique involves reading or creating a scenario, like a short fictional story about a character named Alessandra going through a series of events and playing it out in your mind using the C principle. But the critical addition is that you must actively assign and feel the emotional reactions of the character.
So you have to act it out internally.
Yes. If the story involves Alessandra discovering a hidden secret, don't just picture her opening a door. Imagine the exact look of shock on her face. Force yourself to feel a flutter of surprise or anxiety in your own chest. If you are memorizing a historical event, don't just memorize the dates. Imagine the visceral terror of the soldiers on the battlefield or the elation of the crowd. By intentionally attaching a strong emotion to the information, you fire the amygdala, which forces the hippocampus to carve a much deeper, firmer memory trace.
I love this. It's like comparing passive observation to taking a photograph with the lens cap still on. You might hear the mechanical click of the camera, but when you develop the film, you get nothing but darkness. Mindful observation, using the C principle and the emotional-based method, takes the lens cap off, adjusts the focus perfectly, and uses a blinding flash to burn the image permanently onto the film.
That is a perfect mechanistic analogy, but it brings us to a critical logistical problem. Once you've taken that perfectly focused, vibrant, emotional photograph, where do you put it?
Exactly. If you take 1,000 brilliant emotional photos and just throw them in a massive pile on your living room floor, you still won't be able to find the specific photo you need when exam day comes.
What?
You don't just need pictures, you need a highly organized photo album, you need a mental filing system.
Which brings us to the architectural phase of our deep dive. Information organization. And the undisputed crown jewel of memory organization is the memory palace, historically known as the method of loci.
I have to admit, whenever I hear memory palace, it sounds so esoteric. It sounds like a parlor trick used by illusionists or something Sherlock Holmes does on TV. But the research makes it clear that this technique is actually deeply grounded in evolutionary biology.
It is the most biologically natural way to memorize information. Before humans had written language, before we had smartphones to store our grocery lists, how did we survive? We survived by having an incredibly robust spatial memory. A hunter-gatherer had to remember the exact route across miles of featureless terrain, the specific location of a water source, and exactly where the poisonous plants grew.
If you couldn't map space in your head, you died.
Exactly. The text uses the chickadee bird as a brilliant example of this biological hardware. A single chickadee can remember the specific, distinct locations of up to 80,000 hidden seeds scattered across a forest, retrieving them months later.
80,000 locations.
Yes, human beings possess that exact same ancient spatial mapping hardware in our brains. The memory palace simply hijacks that ancient spatial hardware and uses it to store modern abstract information.
So let's demystify this. I want to simplify this for a beginner who is listening right now and wants to build their very first memory palace tonight to memorize a to-do list. What are the exact steps?
Keep it incredibly simple. Step 1. Pick a physical location you are intimately familiar with. Your own living room is perfect. You want a place you know so effortlessly that you don't have to waste a single drop of cognitive energy trying to remember the room itself.
Got it. I'm visualizing my living room right now.
Step 2. Establish a specific linear route through that room. You need a set path that you will always walk in your mind's eye. Let's create 5 specific anchoring locations, or loci, along that route, let's say. The front door, the coat rack to the right, the sofa in the middle of the room, the television on the wall, and the coffee table.
Front door, coat rack, sofa, TV, coffee table. 5 locations, sequentially ordered.
Step 3. Take the abstract information you need to remember. Let's keep it simple with a grocery list. And apply the C principle we just mastered. We need milk, eggs, bread, apples, and chicken. You are going to take the exaggerated, emotional, energized image of each item and mentally place it at a specific location on your route.
Okay, let's do this. I walk through my front door, that's location 1. The item is milk. So using senses, exaggeration, and energize. I don't just see a carton. I open my front door and there's a giant 1,000-pound cow standing in my entryway, mooing aggressively, and it is violently kicking over steel buckets of milk, flooding my hardwood floor.
Perfect. You can smell the milk. You hear the cow. Now, walk along your route to location 2, the coat rack. The item is eggs.
Instead of curtains hanging there, the rack is covered in thousands of fragile raw eggs. And as I walk up, the rack violently shakes, and all the eggs shatter, raining down gooey yolks all over my shoes.
Location 3, the sofa. The item is bread.
There's a massive, warm, 10-foot-long loaf of French bread lying on my sofa. It has eyes, and it is taking a nap, snoring so loudly the cushions are vibrating.
Location 4, the TV, apples.
The TV is on, playing baseball game, but the pitcher winds up and throws a giant glowing red apple right through the screen, shattering the glass outward into the room.
And final location, the coffee table, chicken.
A giant 6-foot-tall chicken wearing a tuxedo is doing a frantic tap dance on my coffee table, scratching the wood.
It is utterly bizarre. It borders on psychotic imagery.
It really does.
And that is exactly why you will never forget it. When you walk into the grocery store, you don't need a piece of paper. You just mentally walk through your front door. What's standing there?
The cow spilling the milk.
You look at the coat rack.
The shattering eggs.
The spatial architecture combined with the exaggerated imagery makes recall effortless. Your brain simply walks the path and picks up the data. Now, the text notes a crucial maintenance tip for beginners. If you are using this living room palace for short-term data, like a daily to-do list, you must mentally clear the room every night.
Right. Otherwise, you end up with a dancing chicken and tomorrow's dry cleaning overlapping on the coffee table. You have to wipe the slate clean.
Precisely. Now, while the memory palace is incredibly powerful, the sources contrast it with another highly popular organizational tool, mind mapping. And it is important to understand when to use one versus the other because they serve completely different cognitive functions.
Yes, I use mind maps all the time for brainstorming episodes. But how do the sources delineate the two? When should a student use a palace versus a map?
It depends entirely on the structural nature of the information. Memory palaces are linear, they are sequential, they are best used for static data that needs to be recalled in a highly specific order. Grocery lists, legal precedents, historical timelines, foreign language vocabulary, or the sequential steps of a medical procedure. The information doesn't change. It just needs to be stored and retrieved perfectly.
And mind mapping.
Mind mapping is non-linear. It is radial. You start with a central concept drawn in the middle of a blank page, and you draw branching lines outward to related subtopics using keywords and images. Mind mapping is not primarily a storage tool. It is a synthesis tool. It is best used for brainstorming, visual problem solving, and finding complex relationships between disparate ideas.
So if I am studying for a massive exam on the French Revolution, the memory palace is what I use to perfectly memorize the chronological timeline, events, the dates, and the names of the generals.
Yeah.
But the mind map is what I use to understand why it happened. I put French Revolution in the center, and I draw branches out to the complex social inequalities, the economic bankruptcy, the Enlightenment philosophies. The map helps me understand the web of causes, while the palace stores the hard facts.
Beautifully summarized. A palace stores data, a map generates insight. Now, for the listeners who deal with massive, overwhelming amounts of raw data, like an engineer memorizing long number sequences or a student facing a list of 100 terms, the sources offer another organizational tactic, the chunking method.
I am familiar with the basic psychology of this. Our short-term working memory acts a bit like a bottleneck. It can typically only hold about 7 individual items at a time. If I read you a random 14-digit sequence of numbers, your brain will drop half of them instantly. But if you chunk those numbers into familiar dates or phone number formats, your brain treats the chunk as a single item, vastly expanding your capacity.
Exactly. But the sources take this far beyond simple phone numbers. They provide a highly specific advanced spatial example called the safe deposit compartments technique.
Walk us through how this works.
Imagine standing in front of a bank vault wall covered in a grid of safe deposit boxes. Let's visualize a grid of 5 rows and 4 columns, 20 boxes total. If you need to memorize a list of 20 complex items incredibly rapidly, you don't just try to chant the list in your head. You visualize opening the top left box, and using the C principle, you shove an exaggerated marker image representing the first item inside and slam the door. You move to the next box and do it again.
It's essentially a highly compressed, grid-based memory palace.
Yes, and because the grid structure is pre-memorized and logical, a trained practitioner can mentally sweep their eyes across that grid and instantly chunk and store up to 20 distinct items in under 30 seconds. It is a rapid-fire organizational tool.
And for the students listening, this is where the concept of mnemonic associations becomes the ultimate superpower. Because you aren't just stuffing random facts into metal boxes. You use mnemonic associations to link entirely new, difficult academic concepts to things you already deeply understand.
This is the difference between rote memorization and true associative learning. Let's say a medical student is trying to learn the word clavicle, the collarbone. Rote memorization is just staring at the word and repeating it 100 times, hoping it sticks. It is painful and inefficient.
And fragile. Under the stress of an exam, if you lose that one rote link, your mind goes blank.
Exactly. But mnemonic association builds a web. To remember clavicle, the student looks for a sound alike or an image. Clavicle sounds like cave and icicle, so they imagine a dark cave inside their chest, right under their neck, and hanging from the roof of that cave is a giant, freezing icicle shaped exactly like a collarbone.
You are linking the unknown, clavicle, to the known cave and icicle using the C principle. You are building a web of understanding. If one associative link fails during the test, the surrounding context, the cold feeling of the icicle, the location under the neck, will immediately lead you back to the correct answer. It is incredibly robust.
Which brings us perfectly to our final major topic. Because for the listener who is managing truly heavy study loads, someone in law school, or studying for medical boards, or an engineer prepping for finals, A simple living room with 5 pieces of furniture or a small grid of boxes is not going to be enough space. When the volume of information scales up to textbook levels, your spatial architecture has to scale with it. It is time to bring out the advanced tactical memory strategies.
And the sources introduce a fantastic, highly scalable strategy for this called the CAR method, which is exactly what it sounds like, using your favorite vehicle as a mini memory palace.
It is brilliant because a car is an incredibly intimate, contained space that you interact with daily. You know every single inch of it without having to try. The text suggests dividing your car into distinct, sequential zones to store highly complex academic concepts.
So my route could be the front driver's seat, the front passenger seat, the rear driver's side, the rear passenger side, the trunk, and finally the hood. 6 distinct zones.
Yes. And within each of those zones, you can place a complex chunk of data. You could place an entire historical era in the trunk or a complex legal statute on the dashboard. But the real power of the CAR method isn't just the space itself. It is how the sources suggest integrating it into a study routine. They emphasize combining the CAR method with the science of spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition. This is the absolute holy grail of long-term retention. Explain the biological reality of why this works.
Spaced repetition is based on the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which maps how quickly we lose information over time. If you build your mental car palace today and load it with exam data, but you don't look at it again for a month, the neural pathways will degrade. The synapses will weaken.
Right.
But if you review the information at gradually increasing intervals, you interrupt the forgetting process.
So I review the mental car 24 hours after I build it. Then I wait 3 days and review it again. Then a week. Then a month.
Exactly. And here is the biological magic. Every time you force your brain to retrieve that information just as it is beginning to forget it, it requires a surge of TPN effort. That effort signals the brain that this data is vital. In response, the brain dramatically thickens the myelin sheath, the fatty insulation around those specific neural pathways.
Wow.
The thicker the myelin, the faster and more permanent the signal becomes. By combining the spatial power of the CAR method with the biological reinforcement of spaced repetition, you lock the knowledge into deep, permanent retention.
Now, what if a student needs to recall a specific fact immediately, out of order? Memory palaces and cars are great, but they are linear. If I need fact number 14, I have to mentally walk past items 1 through 13 to get there. Is there a system for instant randomized recall?
Yes, and it is a favorite among memory athletes. It is called the PEG system.
I've always wanted to understand how this works. What exactly is a PEG?
A PEG is a mental hook. Unlike a memory palace, which uses physical spatial locations like a sofa or a car trunk, the PEG system links nouns to numbers to create an ordered, permanent list of mental hooks that never change. You pre-memorize the pegs once, and then you can hang new, complex academic facts on them whenever you need to.
The sources outline a few variations of this. The most common is the rhyming peg method.
Let's walk through it. In this system, you associate each number from 1 to 10 with a noun that rhymes with it. 1 is a bun, 2 is a shoe, 3 is a tree, 4 is a door, 5 is a hive. These are your permanent pegs.
Okay, so I have those memorized. How does a student use this? Let's say I am studying biology, and the first item on my exam study guide is the concept of mitosis cellular division.
You take peg number 1, the bun, and you use the C principle to combine it with mitosis. You imagine a giant, pulsing, dividing biological cell crammed inside a hot dog bun, oozing out the sides.
Disgusting, but memorable. Item number 2 is photosynthesis. Peg number 2 is a shoe.
You imagine a giant hiking boot, but instead of leather, it is made entirely of glowing green plant leaves, and it is sitting in the bright sun, absorbing light.
Item number 3 is DNA. Peg number 3 is a tree.
You picture a massive oak tree, but the trunk is twisting into a giant double helix structure made of glowing genetic code.
I see the power of this immediately, because if the exam asks me, what is item number 3 on the study list? I don't have to walk through a mental room. I just think 3 rhymes with tree. I look at my mental tree, I see the double helix trunk, and I instantly know the answer is DNA. It allows for instant, out-of-order data retrieval.
It is incredibly efficient. The sources also mention the alphabet peg method, where A is an apple, B is a boy, C is a cat, and the shape peg method, which is fascinating because it relies on visual geometry instead of sound.
How does the shape peg work?
You associate the physical shape of the number with an object. The number 0 is round, so it looks like an egg. The number 1 is a straight vertical line, so it looks like a pencil. The number 2 has that sweeping curve, so it looks like a beautiful swan.
So if item number 2 on my history test is the signing of the Magna Carta, I imagine a beautiful white swan holding a quill in its beak, signing a giant, ancient parchment.
Precisely. You build your pegboard and you can hang any knowledge in the universe upon it.
The sources also briefly refer to the military method for advanced long-term retention. Now, while they don't give us a step-by-step breakdown of a specific technique named that, the context heavily implies a philosophy of approach.
Yes, the military method in this context is about rigorous, highly disciplined execution. It is the understanding that human memory is not to be left to chance or mood or sudden inspiration. It is about treating your study routine with the precision of a military drill. You schedule your spaced repetition blocks without fail. You systematically construct your memory palaces. You drill the peg system until the associations are instantaneous.
It is the brutal consistency required to reach the final goal of all these techniques, which the text refers to as reaching unconscious competence.
Unconscious competence is the holy grail of learning. Psychologists define the acquisition of any new skill in 4 stages. You start at unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. Then you move to conscious incompetence. You try it, and you realize exactly how bad you are.
Then comes conscious competence.
Yes, you can do the task or recall the information, but it requires immense TPN focus. It requires heavy metabolic effort. It's like when you are first learning to drive a car with a manual transmission. Every single shift of the gear is a complex mathematical equation in your head. You have to think about the clutch, the gas, the RPMs.
But eventually, with enough disciplined repetition, with that military method approach, you graduate. You reach unconscious competence.
The procedure becomes fully automated. The basal ganglia and the cerebellum take over the physical execution, completely freeing up your conscious frontal lobes. You can drive the car, shift gears perfectly, navigate traffic, and hold a complex philosophical conversation with your passenger all in the same time. You perform flawlessly without conscious effort.
Like patient HM tracing the star.
Exactly. It is the exact same biological mechanism that allowed patient HM to trace the star in the mirror, even though his conscious mind was blank. When a student reaches unconscious competence with their academic material, test anxiety vanishes, because the recall is as natural as breathing.
Okay, I have to step in and ask the ultimate skeptical question on behalf of the exhausted listener right now. We have talked about building memory palaces in living rooms, chopping up cars into study zones, memorizing rhyming pegs, imagining bouncing beach balls and giant cows. Doesn't setting all of this up take way, way more time than just sitting down, reading a textbook over and over, and highlighting the important paragraphs?
It is the most common objection, and it is entirely based on a misunderstanding of what learning actually is. Brute force reading, just scanning the text repeatedly and highlighting it, is an illusion of competence.
An illusion.
Yes, because your eyes are moving over the words and the words feel familiar, your brain tricks you into thinking you have encoded the data, but you haven't. You are trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation of loose sand while an earthquake is happening.
Oh, man.
It feels like you are studying, but the retention rate of passive reading is abysmal. You end up having to reread the same chapter 5 times, and you still resort to frantic cramming the night before the exam.
So you are saying the upfront investment is worth it?
Exponentially so. Yes. Taking 20 minutes up front to carefully construct a memory palace, to encode the information spatially, and to attach exaggerated emotional imagery using the C principle feels slower in the moment. It requires heavy TPN effort. But once that architecture is built, the knowledge stays there permanently. It saves you hundreds of hours of relearning, rereading, and the crushing stress of cramming later on. You build the machine once, and it serves you for a lifetime.
What a profound realization. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today, completely tearing down the conventional wisdom of how the brain works.
We have journeyed from the subatomic to the highly practical.
We started by looking at the very mechanics of the mind exploring the Oort theory, and the mind-bending possibility that our consciousness and our memories originate as quantum events happening inside the tiny microtubules of our 86 billion neurons.
We learned that if we want to protect that delicate quantum machinery from cognitive overload, we must embrace the mythology of Lethe. We must master the art of intentional forgetting, balancing our intense TPN focus with the vital daydreaming consolidation of our TNN rest periods.
We realize that the brain is a physiological machine that must be primed. We can literally grow new neural pathways by flooding the brain with BDNF on a stationary bike. And we can build safety nets by challenging our coordination with neurobics, like brushing our teeth with our left hand.
And finally, we moved from the foundational hardware to the software. We learn to abandon the passive gaze and observe the world mindfully. We harness the emotional power of the amygdala using the Alessandra story technique. And we organized heavy, complex academic loads using the ancient spatial architecture of memory palaces, the rapid-fire chunking of safe deposit grids, and the instant recall power of the PEG system.
It is a complete paradigm shift for anyone who feels overwhelmed by information. I want to connect this directly back to you, the listener. The ultimate takeaway from all of this research is that your memory is not a fixed genetic trait. It is not a bucket that simply gets full, and is certainly not a faulty, aging hard drive. It is a living, plastic, endlessly adaptable muscle. It responds directly to how you choose to observe the world, to the emotions you attach to your experiences, to the systems you use to organize them. You possess the biological power to completely rewire it.
And as we close, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. We have talked extensively today about how your conscious attention, your focus, directs the physical formation of your synapses. If our consciousness literally shapes the physical quantum structure of our brain's memory networks, then by actively choosing what we focus on, by choosing what we permanently remember, and by intentionally choosing what we allow ourselves to forget, aren't we actively, physically choosing exactly who we are becoming?
That is a staggering thought to end
Thank you.
on.
Sure.
If you control your memory, you literally build your own identity from the cellular level up. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep observing, keep intentionally daydreaming, and we will see you next time.